Welcome to TV, Tennessee Valley Church. This week we're in downtown Rogersville, Alabama, and we're continuing our series on the faith of our fathers and mothers, those ancient spiritual heroes to whom we trace our heritage. Have you ever been disappointed or maybe even disgusted by the behavior of a pastor or other spiritual leader? Well, today's message is for you. 20 years into Isaac and Rebekah's marriage, God blessed them with twin boys, Jacob and Esau. Never have brothers been more different. The firstborn, Esau, was tough. Jacob, the secondborn, was, well, not. There's a crazy story of how when the boys grew to be young men, Jacob stole the birthright from his older brother, Esau. The birthright, which amounted to twice the property that the younger brother, Jacob, would have inherited, belonged by rights to Esau, the firstborn. But Jacob conned his gullible brother and outright stole the birthright. He tricked Esau into trading the family property to Jacob for a bowl of stew. We're kind of disappointed in Jacob, our spiritual father, that he'd pull a stunt like that. But that's not the last time we'll be disappointed in Jacob. It wasn't enough to steal the birthright. Jacob also wanted the fatherly blessing, a really big deal in that culture, that belonged by right to Esau, the firstborn. And since Jacob was the favorite son of his mother, Rebekah, she determined he'd get it. Rebekah helped Jacob devise an elaborate plan, and Jacob conned his elderly father. Jacob stole the blessing that belonged to his older brother, Esau. Again, we're disappointed that Jacob, our spiritual ancestor, would pull a stunt like that. Fearing Esau's retaliation, Jacob ran, escaped far away to his uncle Laban's place. On the journey to his uncle's house, Jacob stopped one evening to rest. In his sleep, he had an unusual and now famous vision or dream. Jacob saw a great ladder, the top of which reached into heaven itself. He saw angels climbing up and down the ladder. At the top of the ladder stood God. In the dream, God spoke to Jacob and said, "The land upon which you are lying I will give to you and your descendants, and your descendants shall be many. Through your family I will bless all the peoples of the earth. I will be with you wherever you go and will protect you." Jacob awoke, knowing that God had visited him. He named the place Bethel or Bethel, which means the house of God. Make a mental note about this place, Bethel, for we will come back to it soon. So God would bless the world through Jacob. But how could God use such an undeserving character as this Jacob? Well, first, Jacob was Abraham's grandson, and God had promised to bless Abraham's descendants, so God was simply being true to his promise. Second, God saw potential in Jacob. Third, and this is an important lesson, God blesses and uses imperfect people. In the 1990s, our family served as missionaries in Nigeria. I did a great deal of research on the history of Baptist missionary work in Nigeria, which actually began in 1850. I learned about a level of courage and sacrifice that I have never exhibited. Those pioneer missionaries are spiritual giants in my eyes. People whose commitment to telling people about Jesus and meeting their needs was so profound, they were willing to make great sacrifices in order to tell the story and meet the needs. And yet I found that those early spiritual giants were flawed. Many, for example, lived pretentious lifestyles. There are stories of missionaries beating their African servants. Many missionaries in the 1800s actually bought into the theory made popular by some poor academicians of their day that black people were culturally and intellectually inferior to white people. I understand the early missionaries were products of their culture, but nothing excuses those serious moral defects. Yet, Yet those obvious flaws do not negate their positive impact. Literally millions of Nigerians are now followers of Jesus because of the commitment and sacrifice of those early imperfect missionaries. Even democracy in Africa is credited largely to the missionaries' message that everyone matters. God certainly honored the courage and commitment of those flawed people. I.N. Patterson, a missionary to Nigeria in the 1960s, acknowledged the faults of his missionary forefathers and foremothers, and he remarked, "Truly, the Lord has hit some mighty licks with some extremely crooked sticks." And He still does. Most of us have been disappointed by scandals involving church leaders. Most of us have been let down by Christian leaders we admired and trusted. I remember being disillusioned as a teenager by the immorality of a dynamic minister, someone I had chosen as a model. One of the reasons people are leaving churches is that some who claim to speak for God have been immoral, unethical, and even abusive. I believe those spiritual leaders will answer to God for their sins. It's amazing but true that God works through flawed people. Of course, people severely limit the effectiveness of their ministries by their poor behavior, and yet multitudes have been touched by God's work through the lives of people whose track record, like Jacob's, is really disappointing. Maybe that would be helpful for you and me to remember. Maybe I'm speaking to someone who senses a divine call, but you feel unworthy. Maybe you sense deep inside you that God wants you to do something, maybe in church leadership or serving in a faith-based nonprofit, but you're thinking, I'm not good enough. On the one hand, I don't want to appear to lower the standards of spiritual leadership, for I believe God does hold us to a different level of accountability. To exploit one's role as a spiritual leader is a grave sin. And yet I know from my own experience that God graciously calls unworthy people. One of the verses I lean on is 2 Corinthians 4:1 that says, "Since through God's mercy we have this ministry, we do not lose heart." Here's my point. Don't think you are disqualified from joining God in His mission to the world because you are flawed. God does not call only perfect people to serve Him. If He did, He would have a very small circle of associates. In a few minutes, I'll be back to talk about what I believe to be the most important movement in this drama, Back to Bethel.
There's nothing worth more that could ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. I have tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory and sing of the sweetest of loves, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord.
This week, TV Church is in Rogersville, Alabama, my hometown. And right now we're a few miles north of Rogersville at the Fish Creel. We came here to have a wonderful lunch, but most importantly, we came here to talk with Beth Grisham. And Beth has just published a book, Seeds of Perspective. And thank you for letting us come here today.
Well, thank you for coming.
And Beth and I are actually cousins by marriage. Did you know that?
For sure.
Yes.
I'll take that.
Now, Beth, what led to you writing Seeds of Perspective?
I have had the privilege of meeting some of the most wonderful people with the most interesting stories. For a long time, I felt like this is something I would do eventually. I just really didn't know what the topic would be. And so as I met these ladies, came to know more about their stories, and it just seemed like they needed to tell these stories, to have the opportunity for other people to hear. to grow and to be blessed as they saw what the Lord had done through their lives. So I just thought, we'll just put this in a book and see what happens.
And you hit hard topics too.
We did.
You hit infertility, abortion, depression, suicide, pornography, infidelity. How did you talk to these ladies and convince them to share their stories?
I was shaken, to be quite honest, when I asked them, because, and I mentioned in the book, it's a hard thing to walk up to somebody and to say, will you share your hardest secret in life or one of the most difficult things you've ever been through, and just put it out there for everybody to see. But I think it was something that they were willing to do because the goal was to show how God had been at work through it and how He had brought hope and redemption to their stories and these difficult topics that they dealt with. And so they were willing because they wanted other people to find that hope and that healing that they found. We did approach this from an anonymous perspective. For every story, there are other people that maybe you don't want to out. Maybe they don't want their part of your story to be shared, or you don't want to necessarily tell who you are. So that was part of the anonymous aspect of the chapters that we included.
And what did you learn from writing Seeds of Perspective? What did God teach you?
Oh, wow. I think it's been a healing journey for a lot of the ladies that wrote. I think it was encouraging to them to know that somebody saw value in their stories. So for me, it was a joy to be that encourager, to be entrusted. I realized what a gift it is that they allowed me to share their stories. Friendship, and part of that too is the kingdom work of things. I would never take credit for writing a book. I basically organized it all and put it all together in one cover. But it was a kingdom work. And to me, that's how things work best, is when we as individuals all pool our gifts, our talents, our abilities, and work together to do the work that the Lord wants done in His kingdom.
Well, thank you. Thank you for writing the book and sharing stories that needed to be shared. Will there be other books in the future?
I hope so. I know a few more people that have some amazing stories I'd love to share, so we'll see.
Okay, thanks, Beth.
Thank you.
Then God said to Jacob, "Go up to Bethel and settle there, and build an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau." So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, "Get rid of the foreign gods that you have with you, and purify yourselves and change your clothes. Then come, let us go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone." So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods they had, and the rings in their ears, and Jacob buried them under the oak at Shechem. Then they set out, and the terror of God fell on the towns all around them, so that no one pursued them. Jacob and all the people with him came to Luz, that is Bethel, in the land of Canaan. There he built an altar, and he called the place El Bethel, because it was there that God revealed Himself to him when he was fleeing from his brother.
Remember, Jacob was running away after stealing the birthright and the blessing that belonged to his older and stronger brother Esau. Jacob went to his uncle Laban's house up in what is now southern Turkey. He started working for him and married his uncle's daughters, Leah and Rachel. Yes, he had 2 wives, and yes, both of them were his cousins. Remember, that was another day. After a while, Jacob became so successful that his brothers-in-law became jealous and tension arose. Jacob had to leave. As we read in Genesis 35:1, God said to Jacob, "Go back to Bethel and settle there. Build an altar for me at that place where I first appeared to you in the dream and when you were running from your brother Esau." Jacob did go back to Bethel, back to the sacred place where he had seen the ladder and to which God had directed him. God again appeared and confirmed that Jacob now would be known as Israel, the man for whom the nation of Israel is named. Bethel would forever be the defining moment in Jacob's life. the site where he met God twice, the hallowed ground where a merciful God chose to bless a sinful man. And here's what I believe could be a great lesson for us. Some of us might need to go back to Bethel, the place or time or event where we had an encounter with God. Some of us know the exact time and location of our original Bethels, that place and that moment where we first met God. For others of us, it was more of a process, the unfolding of a relationship with God. For some of us, our Bethel was a vacation Bible school. For others, our Bethel was an old-fashioned revival meeting, or perhaps our living rooms or bedrooms. Some of our Bethels were simply a period in our lives. Many of our Bethels are far away from where we now live, and some of us might need to go back to our Bethels. A lady in the first church I served as pastor told me a story of her father who, at a time in his life, had wandered far away from God. His devotion to church had fizzled. In many ways, he had strayed from his Christian commitment. His lifestyle was spiritually unhealthy and harmful to those around him. Then he became convicted of his wanderings, and he went literally back to his Bethel. He returned to the holy site on his old home place, to the very spot, the barn, where he knelt and prayed and first became a follower of Jesus. He went back to that place where he first entered into a relationship with God. Back at that sacred place, his own Bethel, this man confessed he messed up. He asked God for forgiveness and experienced a new beginning. It might be helpful for some of us to return physically to our Bethels, to literally go back to the place where our relationship with God was so meaningful. It certainly would be helpful for some of us to return to the days when we loved reading the Bible and we enjoyed talking with God through prayer, when our lives centered around the church and our volunteer service through the church, back to when our hearts were at peace and our behavior was more aligned with our spiritual values. Maybe your heart has just grown cold over time. Maybe you made bad choices and are ashamed, wondering maybe if God would even welcome you back. Some of you might have left your faith and somehow turned your backs on God. And maybe, just maybe, the fact that you're watching this program right now means that you are at least considering returning to your faith. Well, on behalf of Jesus, I invite you to come home, back, like Jacob, to Bethel. But Travis, I don't have a Bethel. When you talk about encountering God, I don't know what you mean. Well, I do not want to plant seeds of doubt where there should be none. But do you know what I mean when I talk about a personal experience with Jesus? Your experience does not have to be like anyone else's. The question is, where is your hope for here and forever? Is your hope in Jesus and not your own goodness? Is the desire of your heart to know and follow Him? If not, I invite you right now to make that decision. Simply to express to God in your own words your desire for a new direction and your willingness to follow Jesus. Right now, right where you are, could be your Bethel.
Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not thy compassion. unto me. Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings all mine with 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.
Third, and this is an important lesson. One of your old boyfriends, Lisa?